Kicked out, moved on. A year later, my family wants me back. My parents kicked me out of our home almost a year ago, just weeks after I turned 18. That wasn't even the worst part. It happened during high school finals week, leaving me with nowhere to go. Thankfully, I have amazing friends. My best friend and her parents took me in. I'm incredibly grateful to them. I was essentially displaced because my older half-sister, Sasha, became pregnant, and my parents felt she needed to move back home for care. Sasha isn't even my full biological sister. My mom had a fling with Jacob, Sasha's father, in college. She got pregnant but chose not to marry him at the time. Jacob, however, was determined to be a father, so they co-parented Sasha and stayed in touch. When Sasha was 3, my mom met my biological father. They dated for 2 years before getting married. A year into their marriage, my mom got pregnant with me. My father wasn't ready and wanted to end the pregnancy, but my mom refused. They separated, and after my father abandoned her, she cut ties with him and his family before reconnecting with Jacob. My father passed away before I was born, so my mom and Jacob raised me. They married a few years after her divorce was finalized, but I never truly saw Jacob as family because he never treated me that way. I guess Jacob reconnected with my mom because he still loved her and wanted to be on her good side. But to him, I was always a burden. He was cold to me from childhood, and Sasha followed suit. While I got along with my mom, I never bonded with Jacob or Sasha, even though we lived as a family. They always treated me like an outsider. My mom always claimed to love me as much as them, but I never felt it. She never acknowledged the imbalance, and my attempts to connect when I was younger were always rejected. As I grew older, I understood the dynamic and gave up trying to build a relationship with them. I shouldn't have been surprised when they kicked me out for Sasha's pregnancy, but it was still a shock. I should have known Sasha would always be Jacob's priority, no matter our age difference. Still, I hoped my mom would defend me, but she didn't tell about a year ago. Just 2 days before finals week, Sasha told me she was pregnant. She was 24, 6 years older than me. Despite this, my parents decided to kick me out to make space for her and help her save money. Sasha and her high school boyfriend lived in a small apartment nearby. I thought it made sense for her to stay there, but she wanted to move home. She worked from home, and her boyfriend traveled for work, so she didn't feel safe alone. She wanted to move back with her parents while pregnant to avoid being alone and save on rent. Her boyfriend was also planning to move into our apartment with her, so Sasha and my parents decided she'd move back. That would have been fine, but they told me I had to vacate my room for a few months for her. Sasha already had a room in our house, but Jacob converted it into an office after she left for college. My parents said she couldn't stay in the living room, so my room was the only option. They asked me to see it as a sacrifice for the family. I might not have been so upset if they hadn't sprung this on me right before my first exam. I was already stressed preparing for tests for the next 2 weeks, but they only cared about Sasha and her pregnancy. I put my foot down. I told them I wasn't leaving. Sasha had never treated me like family, so I wasn't obligated to make sacrifices for her. My parents tried to reason with me, but I thought they were being unreasonable. We argued until they snapped. Jacob told me I had to leave by the end of the week or he'd throw me out. He said since I was an adult, he had the right to decide who stayed in his house. I expected my mother to protect me, but she sided with Jacob. She said they needed space for their real grandkids and didn't have time or energy to argue. She told me to do as I was told. Her use of real grandkids confirmed what I'd felt for years. My mom. Sasha and Jacob were their own little family, and I was always an outsider.
No.
I was devastated and started packing immediately, forgetting I had an exam the next day. They didn't even try to stop me as I left, showing their true priorities. I ended up on my best friend's doorstep. When I explained everything, she and her parents invited me to stay as long as I needed. You might wonder why I didn't ask other family members for help, but I don't really have any. Jacob's family dislikes me, so I knew asking them would be pointless. My mom's side of the family was also unfamiliar to me. Apparently her parents and family cut her off when she got pregnant with Sasha. They wanted her to focus on studies, not pregnancy, since she was so young. She did it anyway, and no one has spoken to her since. They weren't even at her wedding to my father, or for Sasha's or my birth, she said. So with no relatives, I turned to my friends. After I was kicked out and moved in with my best friend's family, I kept expecting my mother to contact me. I had no such expectations from Jacob or Sasha, knowing they didn't care and were probably relieved I was gone, because I never fit into their perfect family. What really hurt was my mom not contacting me. After a few months, I completely gave up hope. A full year has passed. I've heard Sasha gave birth a few months back. She and her boyfriend have been posting how thrilled they are to be parents. The three of them are still living with my parents, probably to save on rent. Honestly, I couldn't care less about any of it. I've been focused on improving my own life. After graduating high school, I needed to figure out college without my parents' financial help. My best friend's parents generously let me live rent-free, but I couldn't ask them to pay for my schooling, especially with their own 2 kids. I was nervous, but thankfully I'd applied for several scholarships. Being a good student, I got one. From a college I applied to, wasn't my first or second choice, but I couldn't pass up the chance to save money. The scholarship covered 60% of my tuition, so I took out a student loan with my best friend's parents as co-signers. I promised them they wouldn't have to worry about repayment because I'd work while studying and pay it off myself. That's what I've been doing. It's been tough, but knowing I'm succeeding on my own feels amazing. My grandparents revealed the truth I hadn't heard from my family in a year and wasn't expecting them to reach out. Surprisingly, about a week ago, my mother emailed me asking me to come home for the weekend. She claimed she missed me, as did Jacob and Sasha, and they wanted to reconcile. She said they knew they'd treated me unfairly. Her email was unusually charming, faking sincerity, call it gut instinct, but I sensed something was wrong and didn't reply. A few days later, she sent another email, which I also ignored. Despite wanting to know what was going on, I figured there had to be another reason. It was unlikely they'd suddenly feel sorry a year after kicking me out. It felt too convenient. I got my answer 2 days ago, when my maternal grandparents contacted me. I was shocked they found me. I was sure my parents hadn't given them my info. They explained, they asked around, and eventually got my number from one of my high school friends who trusted them. It turned out to be my best friend, and I'm glad she didn't tell me, as it was a welcome surprise. My grandparents called, and I couldn't believe it was them. I'd never known them, seen them, or heard their voices. I was hesitant at first, but then they FaceTimed me and showed me old photo albums of my mom from her childhood. That's when I started to believe they were my grandparents. We all got emotional. I'm not sure why, but we did. We started talking, and I shared details about my life. I tried to avoid talking about my parents, but it was pointless, because they already knew everything. They said a main reason they hadn't contacted me sooner was because of my parents. They'd recently discovered the truth, which prompted them to reach out. I was confused. My mom always told me my grandparents cut her off when she got pregnant with Sasha. That's all I knew. However, there was more to the story. My grandparents emphasized they weren't against my mom having Sasha. They were against her relationship with Jacob. My mom had lied about her parents to protect Jacob's reputation. My grandparents had supported her pregnancy and told her she had the freedom to choose. However, they didn't approve of Jacob because he was a known addict. They'd all grown up in the same area, went to the same high school, and even the same college. So my grandparents knew Jacob's background well. They promised my mom financial support during and after the pregnancy, but only if she broke up with Jacob. They didn't want him to influence her. After much thought, my mom ended the relationship because Jacob couldn't get his life together. My grandparents took full custody of Sasha when she was born, and Jacob had only supervised visitation for the first few years. His degree and got clean, but he relapsed every few months, so my grandparents never fully trusted him. They introduced my mom to my father, who was the son of a family friend. After a few years of seeing each other on and off, my mom married him because she'd given up hope Jacob would ever fully recover. But it seems she never completely moved on from Jacob. A year into her marriage, she began an affair with him and got pregnant again. At that point, my mom had to tell my father about the affair, since she couldn't picture her life without Jacob now that she was pregnant. Her infidelity was why she divorced my father and later married Jacob. So, everything Mom said about my Father's opposition to having me was a lie. After I was born, many paternity tests were done, and thankfully I wasn't Jacob's child. I was, in fact, my biological father's daughter, which was a relief because I had no desire to be Jacob's biological daughter. My father even had partial custody of me for a while, though I barely remember it because it was so long ago. Unfortunately, my biological father died in a car accident when I was 7 months old, allowing my mother to lie to me for the rest of my life. My father's side of the family refused to have anything to do with me after his death, which was convenient for my mother. My grandparents were truly disturbed, and they discovered my mother was having an affair with Jacob. They gave her another. Ultimatum: either cut Jacob out of her life completely and focus on her marriage with my father, or get a divorce and never speak to them again. This time, my mother chose Jacob because he had been clean for about a year, longer than any of his previous stints. That was the final major disagreement my mother had with her parents. My mother was still pregnant at the time, and they didn't communicate again until after my birth. My grandparents eventually softened and decided to contact her to meet me, but Jacob refused to play along and form a happy family with them because of how they'd treated him. So my mother turned down their attempts to reunite. My grandparents didn't give up, though. They tried to contact my mother every few months, but she never accepted them back into her life. This went on for years until Jacob and my mother had financial difficulties and couldn't pay their rent. My mother had no one else to turn to, so she contacted her parents. In a grand gesture, my grandparents gave her a house, hoping it would bring them closer. It was about 6 years ago when my family moved into our new home. It was a huge improvement over our old apartment. I'd often wondered how my parents could afford such a wonderful property in a desirable neighborhood. Given that my mother was a receptionist and Jacob worked in sales and his company had been failing, I now realize it was all thanks to my grandparents. Despite this, my parents, being ungrateful, didn't try to repair their relationship with my grandparents. Both my mother and Jacob knew my grandparents had paid for the house, but my mother insisted they weren't ready to reconnect and needed time to think about it. My grandparents, being naive, gave them space for a few months, but when my mother didn't respond, they tried again. She kept claiming she needed more time. This went on 4 years, and my grandparents eventually admitted that maybe it wasn't meant to be. They were getting older and told me how humiliating it was to constantly try to contact their daughter only to be denied each time. They finally admitted to my mother that they understood why she no longer wanted to be around them and regretted not being gentler in the past. The only thing they wanted was for my mother to keep sending photos of our family so they knew we were doing fine. Surprisingly, my mother agreed, and for the past few years, that's how my grandparents stayed in touch, which was truly sad. They told me everything, and I burst into tears. I had always thought of them as villains, but that wasn't the case. For how they discovered the truth, Kay's grandfather recently had a health scare with heart problems, and he and my grandma realized they couldn't keep pretending everything was fine because they weren't getting any younger. They wanted to make one final attempt to reconcile with the family before passing away. They stopped by my mother's house a few weeks ago, which is technically still theirs because they paid for it and their names are on the deed. When they came, my mother had no choice but to welcome them. They discovered they were great-grandparents when Sasha had her children. But when they asked about me, my parents became uneasy and had no idea what to say. So they told my grandparents I was away at college, and it might not be a good time to contact me because I was in a vulnerable state due to exams. They couldn't even come up with a fake college name, which made my grandparents suspicious. Had a gut feeling my parents had made a mistake, so they left the house to speak with our neighbors. That's how they found out I hadn't been living with my parents for the past year after being kicked out. The neighbors didn't know why, but their son, who went to school with me, told my grandparents I'd been staying with my best friend's family for a while and they might know more. That's how my grandparents contacted my best friend, and they eventually found out what happened to me. Naturally, they were furious when they discovered the truth. My grandparents informed my mother that she and her family would need to evacuate the house to make room for their only real grandchild. It was the ultimate retaliation, using the exact words my parents had used on me. My best friend made sure my grandparents knew how to hit that nerve. It now became clear why my parents were trying to reach out and make amends. They were going to lose their home. My grandparents waited a few days to approach me after learning. Everything because they were concerned about my reaction. They eventually decided to go forward with it since they had wasted so many years worrying about my mother's reaction, and they wanted to do the right thing now. However, my grandparents also wanted to give me the freedom to choose what I wanted. They told me that if I wanted to give my family another chance, they could continue to live in the house. But if I wanted them to leave, that's what would happen. Apparently, when they visited, no one in the family seemed happy to see them, and I was the only one who seemed genuinely interested in building a relationship. My grandparents refused to be taken for fools anymore, so I had to decide whether I wanted my parents to have a home or not. If I'm being honest, I suppose I want them tossed out, but that sounds a little harsh. I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do. Update 1. Hello. First and foremost, thank you for all your encouraging words. It means everything to me, and I appreciate it more than I can express. Regarding my decision, I've concluded that I do want my family to leave that house. I told my grandparents a few days ago, and now they're evicting my family. Of course, there's a lot of legal stuff involved, which my grandparents say I don't need to worry about. My parents have also been emotionally manipulative, especially Sasha, but my grandparents are impervious to it. After speaking with me, they learned about all the falsehoods my mother had been spreading and how she had poisoned their grandchildren against them. They have no more sympathy for my parents. To be honest, Sasha and her partner are working adults, so I'm confident they'll figure something out, just like millions of others. The same applies to my parents. I don't feel guilty about any of it. After all, they didn't feel horrible about kicking me out, knowing I was just 18 and still in school. Despite this, I was able to perform well academically, even though it happened just before my exams. I urged my grandparents not to worry about my college tuition, but they insisted on handling the student loan I had taken out. I also apologized for not being there for me sooner. We have a lot to talk about and make up for, but everything is going great right now. Update to hello. My grandparents started evicting my family a few weeks back, and they have until the end of next month to depart. My mother is not pleased about it. She felt compelled to email me a few weeks ago in an attempt to regain my trust and fix things most likely so her parents wouldn't kick her out. This email was quite different from the one I had received before. This one was full of swear words, saying she wished she hadn't given birth to me. She even said she wishes I had been in the car accident with my father, so we both could have died. So, that's my mom for you. But it no longer bothers me, since to me, she isn't family. If I'm being honest, my only family now consists of my grandparents, my best friend, her parents, and a few relatives whom my grandparents are introducing me to. My mother broke them off long ago since she didn't want anything to do with her family. It's an unusual situation, but I'm adjusting. Update 3. Hello. The holidays have just begun, and I'm back home in my old house. It feels strange to be here, but my grandparents have been living in the house since my family departed, and they've done an excellent job of renovating it. Even, my room feels like home again. We'll be throwing a Thanksgiving dinner shortly, and we've invited some family members, my best friend and her parents. I feel like my life is finally getting back on track. I'm very happy, and I wish I could stay this way forever. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.